Hello everybody, and welcome to Movies by McManus, the channel where we break down movies, comics, TV, books, whatever kind of media you're into, in the context of who created it and what effect it's trying to have on the world. And today we're going to be breaking down the 2020 film Nomadland, directed by Chloe Zhao and based off the book by Jessica Bruder. Recently, this movie won the 2021 Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Actress, and Best Director, making Chloe Zhao not only the first Asian woman to be nominated for Best Director, but also the first Asian woman to win. This film, along with the book that it is based off of, followed the real-life van dwellers of the American Midwest, though in the movie, they're simply referred to as nomads. But the book and the movie show this lifestyle in very different ways. While the movie is a work of fiction, the book is in fact nonfiction, and instead of following a storyline, it documents the real lives of these people. The movie follows a central character, Fern, played by Frances McDormand, who is a character created entirely for the film. But the rest of the characters in the movie are real-life nomads playing themselves. In this way, the film is semi-narrative and semi-documentary. We have a real-life glimpse into the lives of the van dwellers, but we also have a main character that the audience can relate to and see the world through their eyes. So before we really get into the movie, I want to give some background on who the van dwellers are. While this movement started a few years earlier, it really picked up in 2008, right after the Great Recession. After the financial collapse of 2008, many Americans who had invested their money in the stock market or other financial institutions suddenly found that their entire life savings had disappeared. Now, obviously, this would be traumatic for anybody. But while younger Americans still had the option of working, older Americans, either retired or nearing retirement, suddenly found themselves with no savings and no means of income. With their savings depleted and many with houses now in foreclosure, many older Americans took to the road, taking what money they had left to either buy an RV or a van and set out to live as cheaply as possible. So while the majority of these Americans who set out as van-dwelling nomads did so strictly for survival purposes, one unintended result is that this new lifestyle gave them a sense of freedom that the old world never did. Suddenly, they were no longer trapped in the capitalist system of mainstream America, and free from the struggles and anxieties of everyday life. For years, this lifestyle was specifically for older Americans. But soon, a younger generation of van dwellers came into the picture. This younger generation became van dwellers not out of desperation, but instead because the freedom of the road was more appealing to them than the day in, day out of corporate America. And soon, an almost nomad society formed in the American Midwest. This was helped in part by van-dwelling guru Bob Wells, who started his nomad lifestyle in 2005 and runs the YouTube channel Cheap RV Living, where he helps other American nomads to live their lives as cheaply as possible. Bob Wells plays himself in the film, lending an authenticity and giving the film a documentary feel. In it, we see Bob Wells teaching other nomads the best ways to live on the road, along with preaching his own personal philosophies. Wells has said before in interviews that he believes life is a constant trade-off between comfort and freedom, that the nomads don't exactly live comfortably, but at least they are free, while the rest of society may have comfort, but they have very little freedom. Like I said, one of the most interesting aspects of this film is how it blends documentary and narrative style. Clearly, like a documentarian, Chloe Zhao's objective with this film is to bring attention to the philosophies and lifestyles of the American nomads. Now, she could have done this through a straightforward documentary, but by having the narrative style, one, more people would be actually willing to watch the movie, and two, through Fern, the audience can feel like they are actually living this lifestyle instead of viewing it through a camera. Take Bob Wells as an example. In a straightforward documentary, he could have gotten his philosophy across in a regular interview. After all, he's been interviewed several times before. But by having him preach to his nomad followers along with the main character Fern, the viewer then feels like they are in the crowd as well, and it properly shows off Bob Wells' appeal and charisma. This is important because at the core of this film, Wells' philosophy of life being a trade-off between comfort and freedom is front and center, and is the main conflict of our protagonist Fern. So let's talk about our main character. Fern is a van dweller who, like many others, came into this lifestyle due to desperation. But for Fern, this life isn't as easy as it might seem for the other van dwellers. She clearly is not as skilled or as prepared as the other nomads. And throughout the film, we see characters try to lend her a helping hand, only to be rejected. For Fern, this is about not wanting to compromise her freedom. In one scene, Fern visits her sister, who lives in a nice house, and offers her a place to stay. And in another, the character Dave, a former van dweller, tries to persuade Fern to live with him and his family. But to Fern, it's her sister and Dave who have sold out. They've compromised their own freedom, and Fern would rather suffer on the road than go back to being trapped in the mainstream American lifestyle. Several times in the film, Fern is even referred to as being homeless. But it's very clear that even though her life is rough, it's her who decided to live it that way. As Bob Wells says, the van dwellers aren't homeless. The box that they live in is just metal instead of wood. But there is also a dark side to this freedom. In one scene, Fern is talking with a fellow van dweller, Swanky, who can be considered the closest thing Fern has to a friend. And in the scene, it's revealed that Swanky has cancer. Since she has no money for treatment, no job which can provide her health insurance, and since America is the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't guarantee its citizens healthcare, Swanky realizes she has no option but to accept the fact that she will die. The way Fern and the other van dwellers react to this tells us a lot about their lifestyle. While Fern is sad that her friend will die, she understands that this is part of the compromise. To the van dwellers, the fact that they have no option but to accept their demise if they do eventually get sick is a small price to pay for the freedom of the road. The film ends with a funeral for Swanky and a final speech by Bob Wells, saying that what he loves about this lifestyle is that there are no final goodbyes. Everyone just says, "I'll see you down the road." The nomads have accepted that this is their eventual fate if they ever get sick, but to them, it's worth it. In the struggle between freedom and comfort, they have chosen freedom. Now, before the end of this video, I want to briefly talk about Amazon's Camper Force program, since even though it's only mentioned briefly in the movie, it plays a large part in the book, and the book's tie-in documentary, also named Camper Force. In 2008, almost immediately after the new van dwelling movement took to the road, Amazon started its Camper Force program, seeing the van dwellers as potential seasonal workers. Basically, a van dweller can be hired as seasonal labor at an Amazon fulfillment center, earn some money while living nearby in their van, and at the end of the season, leave with no commitment to a full-time job. At first, this seems like an even trade-off. Amazon is looking for workers, but only for a short period of time. And the van dwellers need employment, but don't want to be tied down to one place for too long. Except in interviews with van dwellers who have worked the Camper Force program, it's very clear that Amazon is in fact exploiting these workers. Since many of the van dwellers were in desperate situations, they had no choice but to accept long hours for low wages. One former Camper Force worker said that a typical day they'd be on their feet for 10 hours, moving a total of 17 miles throughout the entire fulfillment center, and that workers were even made to continue their shifts after being injured. Ironically, the book Nomadland and its tie-in documentary Camper Force both came out in 2017, the same year that Jeff Bezos became the richest man on Earth. So it turns out you can in fact have freedom and comfort. You just have to be a billionaire to do it. But let's put my personal opinion on Amazon aside. This movie is amazing strictly because of that mix between documentary and narrative filmmaking. And Chloe Zhao does a great job with it. I'm very happy that she won for Best Director, and I'm excited to see what she does in the future, especially with Marvel's Eternals, which is supposed to be coming out this year. So, if you like Nomadland, if you like Chloe Zhao, leave a comment below. And if you like this video, subscribe to our channel, check out our podcast, and follow us on social media at Movies by McManus. I'm your host, Greg, and have a good night.